Good morning and welcome to the new episode of Dr. Lamba's Awakening Call. This year, the first month is likely to be over in a few days, but it is much about multilateral diplomacy. Till now, diplomacy used to be unilateral. You had your friends, you had your enemies. You were either pro-West or you were pro-Russia. But this is the year, the starting, as a matter of fact, this is a continuation of that. And multilateral diplomacy needs that a country, especially a country like India, which is a multicultural, multi-religious country, has to ensure a historic shift in the great power relations, especially when India is the fifth largest economy of the world and is on the track to be the third largest economy of the world. The endgame of Ukraine war on the nature of the peace settlement in Ukraine remains the decisive variable in 2023. That nobody can deny. And these shifting power dynamics require a certain deft handling. Till now, the situation has not been too bad. But it is not absolutely fine as well. The G20 summit is likely to consume India's diplomatic energies in this year. And that needs, as I said, deft handling. But then, is that the only thing? You cannot deny that India cannot take its eye off the significant shift in the great power equations triggered by the Ukraine war. There have been 3 decades of relative harmony among major powers. That's the West on the one side, Russia and China on the other. And they were, as a result of the end of the Cold War, there was a significant advance in multilateralism. And the likelihood of multilateral agreement has decreased as the major nations compete for dominance. Russia wants to dominate, China wants to dominate, USA wants to dominate, and Germany is waiting in the wings. So does India want to, if not at the international level, at least on the regional level. And when great powers cooperate, at that time multilateralism has reasonable chance of success. And when they don't, then it's a failure. Now, experience of the past is in fact the key to understand the future. Major wars have always reshaped great power relations and rearranged international systems. And Ukraine war is not a local war, let's be very clear. As a matter of fact, as I wrote in my article, it's NATO complete forces fighting against Russia. It's a war by proxy. The same way as the terror attacks in India are a proxy war by Pakistan. And we saw that the First World War saw the collapse of Ottoman Empire, Austro-Hungarian Empire, Russian Empire. In Russia, Soviet Union took birth, and new nations came into being in Europe. At the same time, the Asian nationalism, whether it was China, whether it was Philippines, whether it was India, which resulted in 2 countries, there was Asian nationalism on the increase. And Africa was stirring. Second World War advanced the demise of the European colonialism and heralded the rise of the United States and US and Russia, USSR at that time, as superpowers. And both countries managed an armed peace in divided Europe during the Cold War. Then, the process of decolonization we started saw the birth of a number of new nations in Asia and Africa. And then came the collapse of the Soviet Union, undid its sphere of influence in the East and the Central Europe, and unipolar movement started. The only country which matters was USA. This was the era of massive economic interdependence and followed the Cold War. But then what was there? A rapid rise of China on the international level. Definite emergence of India as a major power. Now, what happens in the two communist countries? Russia-China equation. Russia and China in the 90s were willing to comply in the unipolar movement. At that time, China was not technically advanced. It was not an economic power. Russia had been practically broken up thanks to perestroika policy of Gorbachev and machinations of CIA. So now China wanted to assert against the US-led international orders, so did Russia. After Gorbachev, they said, who the hell is USA to interfere in our relations? So US-led international order was being challenged. Europe focused on strengthening its economic and political integration and wanted strategic importance and autonomy from the USA. Germany, France, they didn't want to be subservient to USA. So what happened? They drew closer over the last decade to Russia. Amazingly, if Russia and Europe fight, most probably I think there's going to be a link between Germany, as I wrote yesterday, that Germany and Russia are possibly in a secret agreement. And now Russia's Putin and China's Xi, they have gambled that the obvious American decline is real. And of course it's irreversible. And let me tell you, President Xi is extremely capable to understand this situation. And so is Modi. Very sharp, shrewd, and discerning. Now, the political disorder in the West convinced China to back Russia. Purpose was reordering European regional security order. So, then a new concept came up. That was partnership without limit and no forbidden areas of cooperation. And that happened within 3 weeks of Russian invasion of Ukraine. On February 24, 2022, the invasion took place. In the second week of March, this partnership without limit and no forbidden area of cooperation was unveiled, that agreement. And no media commented on that. When I saw that agreement, I was amazed. This collusion is tremendous potential. And India is on the border. They are not excluding India because this century is going to be the Asian century and there are only 3 giants. China, India, Japan in Asia. So they have to dominate. And Russia, of course, is the overall umbrella sport. Now, what are the possibilities? Russia's special military operation that was to end in a couple of weeks has dragged for 11 months. So some conclusions can be drawn. First, as the cost of the war mounts, the case for diplomacy will gain ground. Now here is the chance for India to come in. India is not a signatory to that partnership without limits. So India can intervene when both sides are talking peace, but they are also preparing to fight. So if India intervenes now, it becomes the arbiter and the deciding factor. Second, Russia's attempt to eliminate Ukraine as an independent nation and roll back the eastward expansion of NATO are there. And that's important. Now, war has consolidated Ukraine as a NATO, and NATO has expanded. And now Finland and Sweden are waiting to be members of NATO. But thanks to Turkey, they have still not become members. The third is possibility. The war has very clearly demonstrated Europe's inability to defend itself against Russia. And that's despite the fact that the European Union economy is 10 times larger than that of Russia. And still they can't defeat Russia. So Europe will remain dependent on USA to defend itself when war with Russia takes place at a larger level. And USA is emerging as the biggest winner. Now this is the, shall I say, the diplomatic coup by USA. It's not directly involved, but supplying arms. It's giving money. And it's influencing the direction of war and has leverage in defining the terms of peace. So till now, USA is successful in expanding its sphere of influence. But then, as USA becomes a valuable partner in the middle power at the receiving end of Russian and Chinese intimidation, the anger of France and Germany is palpable. Russia's expansion in Europe and Chinese aggressiveness in Asia have compelled Germany in Europe and Japan in Asia to boost their defense spending. Result? America becomes important. So Poland in England, Europe, and Australia and South Korea in Asia, now they are embarking on ambitious national security policies. And that's an opportunity for India. This is a time when India should become a leader in the regional security policies, and India has taken some steps, but not sufficiently definitive steps. Now, if Chinese backing of Russia is a mistake, it has minimized the risk by avoiding armed support to Russia. It has not given any armed support. Moral support is there. Economic support is there. And China is well placed to benefit from Russia's expansion policies. Because when Russia is busy there, Russia would not be able to pay attention to what China does in Asia. So Russia is penetrating Europe, China can penetrate Asia. And here, India has to balance its equation with China and India. Now, till now, India has long relied on Russia to provide a regional balance of power. But it has to rework in the greater power system now. And it should not be too hard given India's importance and the improving relations with USA. Even in the recent episode, when the BBC documentary came up yesterday, USA condemned BBC and supported India. This is possibly for the first time it has happened. So, India is improving relations with US and Europe and focus on diversifying the defense partnerships. India is no longer dependent on Russia. It's gone for the Rafale to France, and it has gone to USA. Of course, it has gone to Russia as well. So, however, India will have to move much faster in developing national capabilities, which luckily it's doing. The way the defense production is taking place is marvelous. And it has to do it to deter China's aggressive actions on the border and also balance China's power in Indo-Pacific. So it's very unlikely, I'd like to conclude by saying, it's extremely unlikely that the world will return what it used to be in 1990s. The tide came and it's over. Now, India's leadership would be a success if it can prevent the complete breakdown of the multilateral system. Here, India has a major role to play. It should try to sustain, consolidate the multilateral system because it cannot be number one power today. It cannot be number two power. Today, at most, it can be number three power. So, as a number three power, it doesn't have much role to play. But if multilateral system continues, then it's in the top three. And then it can be a deciding factor for South Asia, East Asia, and Africa. And India's leadership would be successful, as I said, because then it can generate major power consensus on many issues. Meanwhile, let's not forget the new rules for the global order are emerging, and the like-minded grouping like the G7 rather than the deeply divided G20. We have to develop the groups that are like-minded. And two actions have been taken, Quad 1 and Quad 2. Two U, two I. Two I's and two U's. UAE and USA, India and Israel. And then the Quad with Australia, US and Japan. So what we have got to do is to sustain. If I was to advise Modi, I'll tell him that grouping has to be more. Egypt, we have been ignoring till today. Luckily today, President Sisi is coming to India, and I've written an article which I'm going to publish after some time today, that India's strategic need is to use Egypt, counterbalance the fundamental Islam. That's important for India because huge population of India, 17% is Muslim. You can't ignore that. And it's a multicultural country, as I said. So India's now challenges are there, but they are not insurmountable if we have the will and the capability. Capability we have, and I'm sure Mr. Modi would have sufficient will to do it. Let's look how the things goes. I hope they go for the better. Thank you.